Howdy, here is part 3 of chapter 10. So now we're going to discuss a little bit more of boards of directors. So a board of directors is a group of elected individuals that acts in the owner's interests to formally monitor and control the firm's top-level executives. And the board has the power to direct the affairs of the organization, to punish and reward managers, including hiring and firing CEOs and other top executives, and to protect owners from managerial opportunism. Now, the composition of the board can come from a few different sources. One may be insiders, the firm's CEO and other top-level managers. Historically, they've been actually a dominant source of directors on boards. And there are benefits to having insiders. These people know the day-to-day operations, what's actually happening. The CFO may have insight that others largely don't have. So there are benefits to having company insiders on the board of directors. Next, we may have related outsiders, individuals uninvolved with day-to-day operations, but who have a relationship with the firm, perhaps the CEO of an important customer or supplier. Well, these are individuals that would want to see your company do well because it would be in their own benefit for that to happen. They also may bring insight that is relevant for the industry, but that is different than what your insiders or others might have. And then we have outsiders, individuals who are independent of the firm's day-to-day operations and other relationships. But I want to ask, how often do you think these outsiders are truly outsiders? How did they get nominated to the board? Sometimes they might be outsiders on paper, but they're the CEO's golfing buddy, or somebody from that CEO's MBA program from years ago that they've stayed in contact with. So while they may be outsiders, they're not always truly outsiders. And some of these other informal relationships can make the composition of the boards a little bit more tricky. And this leads to criticisms of boards of directors because many directors too readily approve managers' self-serving initiatives. They may be exploited by managers with personal ties to board members. These boards of directors are not always vigilant enough in hiring and monitoring CEO behavior, and they may lack agreement about the number of and most appropriate role of outside directors. In fact, the size of a board is not always clear. There may be a board of directors with only 5 or 6 directors, or you may have a board of directors that gets closer to 20. And there are benefits and drawbacks to various sizes. Each company is a different situation. Now remember that directors are also agents of shareholders, and as agents, they may succumb to opportunistic behavior as well. So we have new problems at T-Bird Donuts. T-Bird Donuts is now moving in a new direction that you disagree with. What are you going to do about that? Well, previously, you chose to fire the CEO and hire a new one. But who would actually make that decision now? At this point, it's the board of directors that would make the decision to fire and hire a new CEO. But what could you do to ensure that they do so? Well, you own 70% of the company, so you can have a great influence over the board of directors. But what about the other shareholders? Do they get a voice in what happens here? Well, of course they do, but 70% is greater than 30%. So you will win the vote. You can essentially direct the affairs of the organization because of your strong influence over the board of directors. There are companies where this is actually happening. Despite only owning a little bit less than 20% of the stock at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg actually has more than 50% of the voting power because of the way that their stock is structured. In essence, he can control, or he can really influence the composition of the board of directors single-handedly because of his strong voting influence. In essence, there's not a whole lot of oversight because he oversees the overseers, or he oversees the directors themselves. So we need to enhance the effectiveness of boards of directors. And there are a few things that we can do to ensure that that happens. For one, more diversity in the backgrounds of board members. For example, if you can have somebody who has marketing expertise and legal expertise and financial and operations expertise, maybe have some directors with experience in other but related companies, perhaps up or down the supply chain, maybe even competitors. This could bring more perspective, and even things such as gender, age, and racial or nationality diversity can still bring new perspective or different perspective that can enhance the effectiveness of the board of directors. Stronger internal management and accounting control systems and formal processes to evaluate the board's performance can improve the board's effectiveness. Boards may adopt a lead director role, someone who is able to help lead the meetings, help ensure that the board of directors communicates and operates effectively. There also may be changes in compensation of directors. Previously, I asked you what you think or how you think that owning stock in the company would influence board of directors behavior. Well, we know that if the board of directors wants the stock price to go up, which generally is in line with the preferences of the shareholders, that tends to lead to decisions that are, or at least should be, in line with the shareholders themselves and what they would prefer. We can put compensation in place to influence director behavior, just as we do for CEO behavior. So now let's talk about executive compensation. There are various forms of compensation that we may use, such as salaries, bonuses, long-term performance incentives, stock awards, stock options. Executive compensation is a highly visible and often criticized governance mechanism. There are some that believe that top executives should be rewarded for their level of responsibility and highly paid. Others feel that these CEOs are greatly overpaid. In my opinion, or in my observation, I think both of these are correct. There are some CEOs whose leadership and influence is worth extremely high compensation, because there are some leaders that are able to bring value that others would not be able to bring. If you think of somebody like a Steve Jobs, who was so integral to the success and development of Apple Computer, a CEO like that is probably worth pretty much whatever the company could pay them. In other situations, there may be a CEO who is promoted from within the company or maybe hired outside the company, but another CEO would be just as effective as them. In a situation where a CEO is more replaceable, they probably aren't worth as much money because somebody else could do just as well. Really, this is going to be situationally dependent, but I do believe that both of these perspectives has merit. So factors complicate executive compensation. One of these is that strategic decisions by top-level managers are complex, non-routine, and affect the firm over an extended period of time. We may not know whether a decision made today was the right decision for years to come. So we still have to find some way to make sure that, or to influence CEO behavior to hopefully make good decisions. And there are other variables outside the firm that affect the firm's performance over time. We may see a CEO make wonderful decisions, and yet the economy goes into a recession. Well, that wasn't the CEO's fault. Maybe the CEO made all the right decisions, but other factors ultimately influenced the firm's performance. So we need to make sure that compensation packages are put together that properly incentivize CEOs and allow them to make the right decisions, but also that are fair to the CEO themselves. There are other limits on the effectiveness of executive compensation. One is that incentive compensation may be subject to managerial manipulation. Maybe a set of stock options is about to mature, and so the CEO announces some good news just at the right time. The managers therefore manipulating the value of their compensation. Or they may release bad news at just the right time to have a lower stock option strike price. Firm performance may not be as important as firm size. Very often, large firms pay more than small firms. And compensation doesn't reflect the firm's performance as much as perhaps it should. We may not view or properly view or account for executive wealth. Executives that are worth a lot of money may make different decisions than those who are not worth as much. Or CEOs that have high stakes of stock in the firm may make decisions more or less aggressively than others. Maybe they want to protect the value of the stock they already have and not make risky decisions, even if those risky decisions have the potential to pursue growth. CEOs simply don't always make the same decisions. And another concern is options. Stock options are not expensed at the time that they are awarded. And so they may not be really viewed by boards of directors or other stakeholders as much as they should be. So your business is continuing to grow. T-Bird Donuts is popular. A lot of people want your donuts. And so you need to issue more stock. You now only own 30% because you have raised a lot more capital to grow and add new locations. At this point, your CEO is now the chair of the board of directors. And you, the original owner, once again disagree with your CEO. What are you going to do about it? There may be a lot less that you can do about it. You can now be outvoted by the other 70% of shareholders. Your CEO, as the chair of the board of directors, is running the meetings. They control the narrative. They control much of what is happening on the board of directors. So what can you do? Right now, I want to ask you for question number 3, what potential benefits or drawbacks might come from stock options as part of CEO compensation?